Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Wobbling Bookbird. And if you're new here, welcome. We talk about bookish stuff every single week, whether it's reviews, bookish news, or bookish opinions. So if that sounds interesting, please subscribe to our family. And I hope you enjoy this video. And in today's video, I am going to be talking about problematic authors and what you can do about them. Because, as of light of recent events, I just felt like now was a good time to talk about it. So let's begin. So, first off, what is a problematic author? Now, you've probably heard the term, especially through the bookish community, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, but what does that actually mean, especially when it comes to authors? So, the term means basically, according to Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, the word problematic means posing a problem difficult to solve or decide. So in regards to problematic authors, if we apply that, it basically means someone whose actions are questionable, causing the reader to struggle to decide whether or not they are worth supporting. Right? So they may be classed as problematic if they've gone basically the social norms of society at that present moment. And this can change, which is why you get sometimes things that would have been acceptable in the past, like sexism, much later on, like now, it's seen as something to frown upon, and it would be classed as problematic. If you look at something more present time, I suppose, you look at Shane Dawson, who in the past his actions were sadly seen as acceptable and was fine, and in some cases even funny by people. Now it's seen as hugely questionable, horrible behaviours. People are classing him as problematic, but even a step further, that they've cancelled him. And we're going to get into cancel culture in a minute, but back then his behaviours were seen as socially acceptable. Now it's seen as socially wrong, which is why someone can be problematic now, but in the past they wouldn't have been, which I suppose is both a positive and a negative in itself. It's a positive because, well, it's good that society has now caught up with what was wrong then, which, is now being called out for, and the behaviours are being held accountable now. But also a negative thing, because these behaviours should have always been seen as a wrong behaviour, just like racism and sexism and so on. So yeah, it's led to him being cancelled last year, which led to him losing his career, people, like his relationships with people, and a huge portion of his fan base turned against him. And this is also seen in the bookish community as well, which we will get into, because there are authors that, are now seen as problematic. I mean, there's a massive famous one, which we will talk about. I think it is important to establish that there is a big difference between someone who has been cancelled and someone who is problematic. I like to think of someone being cancelled as like the next step after them being classed as problematic. And just because someone is classed as problematic doesn't always mean that they're going to get cancelled. They are two very different things. And if you're interested in my opinions on cancel culture and what it means in the bookish community, I am happy to do a video about that. In fact, it was something I would enjoy talking about with all of you. So yeah, if that's an interest, please let me know. I think it is important, though, to talk about cancel culture in the same breath as problematic authors. Because for like a long time, J.K. Rowling was seen as just problematic. It wasn't until much recent, well, I do that, but she was seen as problematic, right? And it wasn't until much recently that she was cancelled by society. And I think the big difference between the two is you may look at someone and their beliefs, their values, what they're writing about is seen as problematic for you as a person. And you may belong in a collective small group of people who do see that behavior as problematic. But it isn't until that number grows and grows and grows and grows to the point that companies and the industry and I suppose society as a whole looks at you and goes, you're not just problematic now, like, you need to be cancelled. And when I say cancelled, I mean until you accept that what you did was wrong, you're going to lose out a lot of people's support because they don't support what you support. So, for example, with J.K. Rowling, a long time she was seen as problematic, but then because of her tweets last year, which led to her, I suppose, being very upfront about how she feels about the trans community, which up to that point, you would have one group of people who were like, no, you're being transphobic, but then another group of people going, she doesn't mean it like that, making excuses in the hopes that she, that she wasn't meaning like that. Her tweets last year led to her being cancelled because of it, because her beliefs were seen as, yes, you are transphobic, that is who you are, that is what your beliefs are. So that led to her losing a lot of support from the bookish community, a lot of support from her fellow peers, such as Daniel Radcliffe, who called her out on it, and has led to a lot of bookish companies like Litjoy, Fairloop, and Illumicrate dropping working and associating with her. So that to me shows a difference between being problematic and being cancelled. When you're being cancelled, as people say, you lose a lot of support, and a lot of companies within the industry that would support and work with you, you've suddenly lost that. You've lost that privilege. Well, people who are just classed as problematic haven't lost that yet. There's still time to see where it goes. They might be able to apologise, be accepted back in the bookish community, and then, would be seen as having a problematic past, but won't be seen as problematic. So how does that relate to now? You may have heard of more recent authors being talked of as being problematic. Recently, Emily Duncan's behaviours has came to light of her anti-Semitic views in her series, Something Dark and Holy, which includes books such as Wicked Saints, Ruthless Gods, and more recently that's came out, Blessed Monsters. Additionally, author Ren Turbico has brought to light Emily Duncan and her friends' bullying behaviours on Twitter, as they've bullied authors such as Emily Renzo, the author of Blood Air, who I love, and Hafsa Faisal, the author of We Hunt the Flame, whose book I haven't read yet, but I'm going to read very soon. Additionally, J. Kristoff's past behaviours in regards to his first series has also came to light again. I say again because it's apparently something that is brought up a lot in the bookish community, pretty much like every year or so. I don't know. I don't know the truth of these claims. I believe that is true, that it has probably came up again, time and time again. Society just wasn't ready to hold him accountable for it, and they are now. So, additionally, J. Kristoff's past behaviours, especially in regards to his first series, which is called The Lotus War, and the first book of it is called Storm Dancer. Now, it came to light in regards to how he represented Japan and its culture within that series. Both authors here has caused massive outbursts on social platforms from the bookish community, such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, which has led to a lot of conversations being had with people during the what should they do, with some people getting rid of their books, others buying their books, and others just being conflicted on the fence and not sure what's the best thing. So I'm here to say, what should you do? And I'm here to answer that. So, in regards to what you should do, I think the first thing is to understand, and something I want to make clear, is that the term problematic author should not, these people that have been classed as problematic, have been classed as there being questionable behaviours, whether present or in the past, they shouldn't be grouped together. And I feel like it's very unfair to do that. I don't think J. Kristoff's behaviours are on the same light as J.K. Rowling's, for example. So you need to basically separate these authors out. Don't group them together, because that's wrong. And as a person, you need to look at basically how you feel about them, how you feel about their actions. What are your core beliefs and values? Because your core beliefs and values will influence how you feel about them, right? So if you feel, very strongly for, let's say, transgender rights, and you see yourself as an LGBTQIA ally, the way you look at J.K. Rowling would be completely different to how you look at Emily Duncan, right? And I think that's really important that you need to think about when you're looking at these authors. It's something I do when I look at all these authors. Okay? Yeah, I believe that they should be spoken about separately, otherwise emotional bias will kick in when you unknowingly put how you feel about one author on another, which may cloud your view and may lead to you doing something you may regret later on, such as getting rid of books that you hadn't. It's also important, I think, to give yourself time to process what's happened. And I say this in the way that, it's important to give yourself time to digest information for you to then work out what is the best thing for you. Because if you're someone who is, as I say, massive supporter of transgender rights, what you do next will okay. So what you do next will, affect kind of a lot of how, because if you decide to get rid of some books and then you may actually want them later on, or new information that comes to light that you didn't know about, information that you didn't know, that you didn't know about before, that then changes how you view them. You don't want to act rashly, that's what I'm saying. It's important to gather as much information as you can, and I think that's really important. I think it's also important to not just look to other people to see what to do to an extent. I think it is important to talk about situations. That to me is extremely important. You've got to have conversations with people, because I think that does help for things to, digest in your mind, like it helps me. But I think it's important to not just join onto a train of, let's say, hate train or cancel culture of, it's not good for you mentally, and I think you've got to always look after yourself. And you may do something you may regret. Let's say you decide to message one of the authors and that, that have upset you because of their views. Let's say you decide to message one of the authors because you're upset with their views or their behaviours, and, it gets you in trouble with Twitter or Instagram when they report you. You don't want to do that. You don't want to fall into that kind of being low as a person. You're better than that. Everyone is better than that. So, I think it's really important to not make a rash action, because you gotta give yourself time to just cool down, especially when a lot of, depending on who you are, which would affect, whether you're hurt by their statement or whether you're angry on the people that they've hurt behalf, right? That's important. That's important, in my opinion. So, secondly, I think it's also important that there are, I'm going to roughly say, 6 groups of people when situations like this come to light. There's 6 groups of people, right? You've got the hate group, number 1. People who don't feel one way or the other. They don't love that person, they don't hate that person, but they just love to hate. They're a small group of people. They will just get themselves involved in this whole situation, and they shouldn't, just because they like to make trouble, or they just like to hate, and they tend to be quite loud. As I said, they are a very small number, but they can be quite loud. Just, yeah, ignore them. The oh so loyal fans, which is group number 2. These are people who are loyal to the author and won't question them no matter what. Just give them time. Because sometimes people who jump in to defend is because they're hurt, they feel personally attacked, so they're quick to just jump in and defend the author as a way of just self-reflecting from how they feel inside. They don't want to face it yet, so just give them time. The all so-called allies, and I do it in this quotation because they're not true allies, they try to push their own agenda, and they can and will use this whole situation to their advantage. These are the people who don't actually listen to the victims or to the people who have been hurt, but they have a hollow, I'm right about this attitude, even when people have pointed out that they're wrong. They will also probably guilt trip you for being a previous fan of their work. I saw a lot of this during the whole J.K. Rowling thing, and yeah, just ignore them. Like, you've got to go at your own pace. And the whole so-called allies, that a true ally listens. A true ally, if someone is telling you how this author has hurt them, you don't talk over them, and you don't make your opinion bigger than their voice. Which brings on to the 4th group, actually. But there. Number 4, the actual allies. These are the people who are taking part in these conversations to try and get to the root of what's best to do for the community or for the industry moving forward, right? Sometimes they don't actually, they will take part in conversation, but it'd be quite minimal. They're trying to let the victims have their say and get their voices heard among all the noise of everybody else. These are the good people. These are the people that are there. They strive to try and make it better. They understand that it's a very complicated situation. There is no such thing really as villain and heroes. Just, it's not black and white is what I'm trying to say. Even with people like J.K. Rowling, who I personally do not agree with her views whatsoever. She is a person at the end of the day. She's not, your villain of a story. She is a person who has her views, which I don't, I don't agree with and I don't support. But, it's not up to me what everybody else does. And it's not up to everybody else either. The only thing it's up to is you. It's what you do. It's what you choose. And who you want to support. And people just need to learn to just accept that there will be people who, will support these problematic authors, or probably don't see it as such as an issue in comparison to other people. It's just one of those things. It's like, as I say, it's complicated. It's the kind of situation where you're having, as people call woke young people versus the older generation. Even though I don't really view it as that, because I've seen people in the older generation being woke as society defines them, and I've seen younger people having a very more traditional view. I think I'd like to look at it as more of a traditional or modern view of things, right? People who class themselves as more like a modern view or tend to be people who care about politics because of how it influences things like laws, attitudes towards things. It's trying to improve, the world. And don't get me wrong, sometimes good intentions may lead to bad consequences. That does happen. But sometimes having good intentions actually leads to good consequences. Look at global warming and how the younger generation below me have really taken on themselves, and I'm proud and I respect them so much to try and, stop global warming. I think they're amazing, and yeah, I support that completely. But at the same time, I also know that there are people who have more traditional views who you're not going to take into their minds. Especially yelling and screaming at them is not going to do it. That forces them more into their mindset and bubble, like with J.K. Rowling, for example, who I think that's kind of happened. Like people, I'm not saying it's everybody else's fault. It's her fault for not doing the education that she needed to do. But it's just one of those things. You can't get everyone to listen to your own views, and it's just how it is. So the allies or the people who want to listen to, the victims of these people, their views, and letting them talk, because that's really important. And 5, as I said before. So yeah, and 5th group, the victims. The people who have been affected by the author's comments, behaviours, or views in one way or another. For example, the trans community were the victims of J.K. Rowling's comments last year. And it was their voices that were trying to be heard among the noise in the bookish community. These are the people who we need to listen to. It's like, as a white person who is, well, Wiccan, I can't say, like, it's not for me to dictate how victims of anti-Semitic views of Emily Duncan's anti-Semitic views in her books have hurt Jewish people. That's nothing to do with, like, that. I can't make a statement there, because I'm not Jewish, and I would never try and act like I am, or say I am, because I'm not. But what I can do is, like, Jewish people who are coming out and saying her works have hurt them, I can retweet, if I'm on Twitter, retweet their voices, retweet their tweets, and get other people to listen to these people, to the community, the Jewish community who have been hurt. And I think that's really important, because I think sometimes we do that. But yeah, I think it's important. So, and number 6, the last group, trying to figure it out group. This is probably the largest group, and if you're watching this video, there's a chance you might belong in this group. I still am a part of this group to a point. With Emily Duncan and J.K. Rowling, I probably fall into, I strive to fall into group 4. I want to be a good ally to the people who have been hurt. For J. Kristoff, I'm probably in group 6, who, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm waiting because, there's information that might be coming out about him, of his statements, because I think he's making one, working with a company. I'm very unsure where I stand with him. As I bring on to the next point, where you fit in to these groups depends upon the situation, how it's affected you, your own morals, your values, and just how you feel. Everyone's different, so we've all had different experiences in life. So our morals will be different too, and that's okay. As long as it doesn't affect human rights, it's okay to have different values and opinions, right? And I think it's also important as well, really quick, that, like, while it's a lovely idealised world to live in where we can care about all the issues of the world all at once, that in itself is overwhelming, and I wouldn't recommend. It's important to, like, a lot of the time, while it's amazing if you can do something big to tackle these issues, racism, homophobia, sexism, etc., sometimes you just have, even the smallest things can make the biggest influence. So, for example, when it comes to Emily Duncan, I fall into group 4. I'm listening to what people are saying who have been hurt by her. Whilst when it comes to Kristoff, at the time of the recording, I'm in group 6 as I'm waiting for a statement that's going to come out soon. And as I say, you have to do what feels comfortable to you. What is your gut instinct saying right now? That's where you kind of cut through a bit of confusion. And just go with that. So the last thing I want to mention is that while it's good to hold people accountable, and it is good, we should all do more of it in our lives. In a calm way, not as a yelling, screaming way. Calm way. People generally tend to listen more if you do it in a calm way. Because no one's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. Even me, especially me. I've made loads. The amount of times that, I've had people sit me down and be like, this and this, and I'm like, crap, I'm sorry. I've had to apologise and take accountability of my actions. Right? While it is good to hold people accountable, what about forgiveness? Because if there's one thing I've seen in the bookish community is that it's not really spoken about. And I feel like it really needs to be. And now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we need to forgive people like J.K. Rowling, who don't want forgiveness. They're very stuck in their ways, they don't want to be educated, they don't want to learn, they don't want to listen. No. But for others who actually do care, for the ones who actually admit their mistakes and own them and apologise, well, why do we, as a bookish community, hold contempt for them? If we don't let authors, because by holding contempt for them, and we're basically preventing them from taking accountability. Because if we don't let them take responsibility for what they've done and forgive them, how are they supposed to grow, change, and be better? Like, if you're just gonna carry on hating on someone who has accepted that their behaviour was wrong, has apologised, why should they change? Why should they try and be better if we don't let them try and be better? Right? I think this is really, really important. And I think it's a conversation that really needs to be had in the bookish community. Because it's becoming a big issue now. There was probably a time when this conversation about J.K. Rowling, with J.K. Rowling, could have been had. And we might have actually done something to change how she views things. But, it didn't get to that point. Also, the ear you can see here is Jolteon. He's just chilling. He came today. He's my Jolteon plushie, and he's so cute. I love him. He's so cute. Look at his ears flopping. Love him. Anyways, so you can just see his little ear there. So ask yourself this: if Kristoff made a public apology and made a statement apologising for his first series, would the bookish community accept it? Would you accept it? I honestly don't know. And I'm not saying that you should or you have to. For what I'm saying is, for your own sake, for mental health, maybe it's better if you do. Because holding on to that type of hatred and anger, the only person who it's going to have a negative impact on is the person who's holding on to it. It's you. And I think that's an issue. I mean, look at, for example, people forgave James Gunn for his comments he made years ago, which got him fired from Disney when it was brought up again. And then it got him rehired from Disney when they realised that they were being silly. Accepting apologies and giving forgiveness is a personal thing, and you never should feel forced to accept an apology from someone. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is the dangers of not doing so, of holding that hatred, of always holding them accountable for something that they've already accepted accountability for. Like, that's quite tiring, I'd imagine, to do that. And it's like now when I hear J.K. Rowling said something else, it's like, another thing. It's timing, it's like there's only so many times you can keep saying the same thing to her before you just realize she's just never gonna get it. And honestly, the best thing to do is to just not support her, not follow her, not give her the attention, just ignore her, basically. So I suppose what I'm talking about here is you should always look after yourself first. And sometimes looking after yourself may mean doing something that you don't particularly want to do. We've all been there. I have. From the small things. Like as someone who has mental health, chronic illnesses, sometimes I don't feel up to having a shower. I'm too exhausted to have a shower. But I know that if I don't, it's going to have an impact on my mental health. Because, all of a sudden you're being unhygienic, you just feel really crap on the outside, which makes you feel even worse on the inside. Right? And I think this is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's good to have passion, to want to change, to help improve people's lives, to try and make the bookish community, for example, a nicer place, or even just a world nicer place. But just remember to look after yourself first. And don't let something like negativity affect you and the way you feel all the time. Right? So, an author we can look at here is Naomi Novik, who last year was called out for racism in her book Untitled Education. Since then, she has had that comment removed from her book. So if you bought that book right now, that comment you won't be able to find. And has also made a public apology. Question: should you accept it? That's up to you. You're the only one who can answer that and make that judgment. I think this also kind of points out another issue as well within the industry of publishers not using sensitivity readers. Sensitivity readers are people who read the book before it comes out, and their job is to look out for issues in the books regarding stuff like sexuality or race. Basically, it really depends upon what that book is about. Would depend on the type of sensitivity reader that's being used. And I feel like if her book was read by a sensitivity reader and the issues were highlighted by them, the whole controversy last year would have been avoided. Like, it's so strange to think about how different that would have been now. Because not only would you have people reading Adult Education just looking at the book as a whole without all the controversy added in, you'd probably also have like a lot of bookish companies doing the second book that's coming out this year. Well, now the only company that's actually doing a pre-order, well, I say it's the only company that's doing a signed pre-order that I know of right now, I think is Forbidden Planet. Maybe Waterstones, not sure. But in terms of a limit crate, an hour crate, I've heard nothing. And it just goes to show how controversies with authors can be very damaging. And it's important to make sure before you call someone problematic or you try and get them cancelled or join the cancel culture because you believe that that person should be stopped and should not be supported anymore, you do a lot of research surrounding them and what the controversy is about. So, for example, with J. Kristoff right now, he might decide, or his publisher might decide, that they're not going to publish any more of the Lotus Wars. It's a very old book. It's like, I remember someone saying it was like 7 years old. And it wasn't very good, according to him. They might stop publication of it. It's a lot of stuff is very up in the air. Like, if he makes a statement and he apologizes, and the bookish community decide to forgive him, well, how people react right now would dictate what happens next. Right? Like, if people decide to forgive him and they're not going to cancel him, his career is fine, because at the end of the day, or to a lot of people, these are books. To them, it's a career, it's money, it's a job, it's their livelihood, and I think that's really important when you take that into an account. Of course, there are some people who shouldn't be able to profit from, what they believe in or what their behaviours are, such as Shane Dawson, for example, who got cancelled, and thank God he's not making videos anymore for now that we know, because of all of his questionable behaviours from last time. People like J.K. Rowling, who also shouldn't be as well, although I've heard that there's going to be another, 3 more films for the Fantastic Beasts. I do wonder whether that's going to go ahead, because I have a feeling the studio might pull out, because if there's not a lot of support and there's not a lot of fans, what's the point? Because for these companies, what is the most important thing? Money. That's all that it comes down to for them. So this is the thing, like, when you have like I don't understand why J.K. Rowling thought that was even a good idea. I'm not saying that you shouldn't share your views out on public, but what I am saying is, if your career is on the line, you need to be professional. And I think that's where people like J.K. Rowling, Emily Duncan, and Jake Kristoff have gone wrong. They just haven't acted professional. Regardless of what their views are, their views are always going to hurt someone. So, or offend someone, or make someone angry. And it's weird. Like, it's really sad too. Not in regards to the authors, but for the people that they've hurt. I've always wanted my YouTube channel to be a safe place for everybody. No matter who you are, this channel is a safe place for you. Whether you're transgender, or regardless of race or sexuality, whether you're asexual or, it's up, or whatever religion you are, right? That's important too. So yeah, this video is getting very long. I think at this point I have like 40 minutes worth of footage, and we need to try and cut that down. But if you're interested in part 2, let me know, because I think I probably do have more things that need to be said or talked about that we can. I'd like to expand this conversation more, because I think that'd be good. I'd like to get feedback from you guys. But yeah, and I hope I haven't hurt anybody through my own opinions or my own statements in this video. So I'll see you next time. Bye. Happy reading.